The year is 1651. On the 16th day of Ramadan, the chief black eunuch Suleiman Aga and his armed men descended on the palace. They proceeded to Kosem's quarters, killing the guards. Kosem thought it was the Janissaries she had ordered to kill Turhan Sultan, but it was an unexpected countermove from her opposition. She crept into a small cabinet, hoping that the Janissaries would come to her rescue. How did the novice Turhan Sultan manage to trick the most powerful and experienced woman in the Ottoman Empire? Turhan Sultan was born around 1627, and her original name was Nadia. She was captured by Crimean Tatars who raided Eastern Europe for slaves. She was sent to the imperial harem at the Topkapi Palace from the Khan of Crimea as a gift to Kosem Sultan, mother of the Ottoman Sultan Ibrahim. She was trained and groomed by Kosem to be presented to her son. Kosem was the chief consort and legal wife of the Ottoman Sultan Ahmed. After his death, she remained in the palace as an advisor to Ahmed's unbalanced brother Mustafa, and afterwards Ahmed's young child Osman when his uncle is dethroned. Kosem had 4 sons from Ahmed, and she was hoping that by keeping them alive, one day they would be on the throne. Her children were sent to the old palace under guard, fearing of a rebellion to get them to the throne. Kosem's youngest son, Ibrahim, was only 2 when he was locked in the old palace. The Janissaries rebelled and put Murad, Kosem's firstborn, on the throne. She ruled in his name as his mother. Murad's brothers were moved to a part of the Topkapi Palace called cafes, literally meaning a cage, where they would be on house arrest and constant surveillance by the palace guards. Murad was concerned that his fate would be same as his predecessor if he kept his brothers alive. He eventually ordered the execution of his brothers, Suleiman and then Qasim. Of Kosem's last surviving sons, the mentally unstable Ibrahim lived in fear of being the next of his brothers to be executed by Murad. On his deathbed in 1640, Murad told his mother of his disdain for his brother Ibrahim, saying that it would be better for the dynasty to end rather than continue with an heir who was insane. Ibrahim's life was only saved by the intercession of his mother Kosem, who argued that he was too mad to be a threat. Following Murad's death from cirrhosis at the age of 27, Ibrahim was the sole surviving prince of the dynasty. When the Grand Vizier asked him to assume the Sultanate, Ibrahim suspected Murad was still alive and plotting to trap him. It took the combined persuasion of Kosem and the Grand Vizier to make him accept the throne. Kosem ordered his brother's corpse to be displayed before him and even threatened Ibrahim with strangulation if he refused to be crowned Sultan. With the accession of Ibrahim, Kosem once again became politically active as his principal advisor. Now entering her 4th decade of political involvement, Kosem was a shrewd and experienced politician. Ibrahim's sexual impotency was assessed psychologically, and his mother summoned a number of Hodjas to treat him, but all of whom were unsuccessful. In a desperate attempt, Kosem then invited the alleged sorcerer Jinji Hoja to the palace. He supposedly cured Ibrahim's impotency by offering him a cocktail of aphrodisiacs and seductive females. Soon, 3 of Ibrahim's concubines were pregnant in the same year. Turhan gave birth to his first child, Shehzada Mehmed, born on the 2nd of January 1642. Mehmed's birth caused great rejoicing both within and outside the palace. Although she bore the Sultan his first son, she was largely ignored by him. The Sultan rewarded the Hoja with a chief justiceship, the 2nd highest position in his council. Jinji Hoja, along with his allies, enriched themselves with bribes and eventually usurped enough power to secure the execution of the Grand Vizier. With his cronies in power, Ibrahim's extravagant tendencies went unchecked. He raised 8 concubines to the favoured position of royal consort, granting each riches and land. The next year, the Janissaries and members of the council revolted. Ibrahim was seized and imprisoned in Topkapi Palace. Kosem gave consent to her son's fall, and he was strangled on the 18th of August 1648. Ibrahim's 6-year-old first son, Mehmed, was made sultan. Despite her wish to retire from politics, Kosem was persuaded by the leaders who overthrew Ibrahim to remain as the regent of Sultan Mehmed, since she had more statecraft skills and experience than Mehmed's young mother, Turhan Sultan. The Janissaries trusted Kosem as their ally and thought she defended their interests. Turhan turned out to be too ambitious a woman to lose such a high position without a fight. In her struggle to become Valide Sultan, Kosem was supported by the Janissary corps and the Grand Vizier, while Turhan got the support of the chief black eunuch in her household, the harem. Although Kosem's position as the Queen Mother was seen as the best for the government, the people resented the influence of the Janissaries on the government. The city's traders rebelled in 1650. The Janissaries had to be paid with bad coins because the treasury had no money. The merchants refused to accept them and shut down their shops. They went out to the streets and asked for the Grand Vizier to be dismissed. Kosem's Grand Vizier preferred to hide and send his seal back. The elderly Siyavush Pasha, who was favoured by Turhan Sultan, was instead appointed. The rebellion was crushed by the Janissaries' force. Political figures who resented Kosem's alliance with the Janissaries encouraged Turhan to resist the regent's monopoly of power and patronage, and she began to plot against Kosem. Courtiers then took sides. The Janissaries remained loyal to her, while most of the harem and the palace eunuchs and the Grand Vizier Siyavush Pasha favoured Turhan. Once Kosem realised this, she planned to take young Mehmed off the throne and put his younger brother Suleiman in his place. She thought Suleiman's mother would be less of a threat to her. Her scheme was to get rid of Turhan by changing one young sultan for another. Kosem secretly asked the palace guards to leave the gates open so that Janissaries could sneak in and kill Turhan. She also allegedly gave 2 bottles of poison sherbet to the head cook in the palace kitchen to give to the child sultan. But one of her servants told the chief black eunuch about her plan the day before it was supposed to happen. He and the Grand Vizier went to see Turhan Sultan in the palace and together decided to kill Kosem right away, before the Janissaries could interfere. Black eunuchs moved silently and rapidly. Hearing the commotion, Kosem fled along the Golden Way to the dome, with closets hoping to escape from the palace through the carriage gate. The gate was locked, so she crept into a small cabinet, hoping that Turhan's eunuchs would pass her by and that the Janissaries would come to her rescue. A piece of her dress that was sticking out from under the cabinet door gave Kosem away. They pulled her out by force and strangled her with a piece of cord ripped from the curtains. Kosem Sultan died on September 2nd, 1651. With the death of her rival, Turhan became the Valide Sultan. As a regent, Turhan wielded great power. She accompanied her son to important meetings and on several occasions spoke from behind her curtained sitting place. She was deeply loved and respected by her son. Due to her inexperience, Turhan relied on other members of the government to advise her on political matters. Turhan's regency was marred by financial crisis that arose from the high expenses of waging wars and continuous threat of rebellion by dissatisfied Janissary. Weak Grand Viziers did not improve the situation. However, in 1656, Köprülü Mehmed Pasha was appointed to the position of Grand Vizier. His condition upon accepting the post was that he be given greater authority than his predecessors. Then on, Turhan transferred her political power to a series of Grand Viziers which created long-term stability in government. Sultan Mehmed, with the support of his mother, continued the Turkish expansionism in the second half of the century. This caused a conflict between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Ottoman Empire as a precursor of the Great Turkish War. It ended in 1676 with a treaty and the Commonwealth ceding control of most of its Ukraine territories to the Ottomans. That was followed by the Russo-Turkish War between 1676 and 1681. After a few years of peace, the Ottoman Empire, encouraged by successes in the west of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, attacked the Habsburg monarchy. The Turks almost captured Vienna, but a Christian alliance defeated them in the battle, which marked the end of the Ottoman threat to Europe. Turhan Sultan died on the 4th of August 1683, before the news of the Vienna defeat arrived.